Who is your most beloved Vol? We want to hear that on the message board. Eric Berry will be honored for his induction into the College Football Hall of Fame. I've said this before. When guys go onto the NFL, I tend to root for people over jerseys. I'm a Cowboys fan, but man, if Eric Berry was lined up on the other side, playing for the Chiefs, which obviously he's not, I would have trouble not rooting for Eric Berry because I think he's one of the most standout individuals, both as a person and as a player that Tennessee has ever had. I think you're talking about one of the elite defensive players, not just defensive backs, because they would roll him up at the Chiefs to play a little linebacker as well. I think you're talking about one of the elite defensive players. I'm talking 8 to 10 in the history of the game. I think he would have been that good had it not been for dealing with cancer, for the ACL injury, the Achilles injury. It just seemed like when he left Tennessee, and he was hurt at Tennessee as well, Caleb, that the cards were not in his favor. But all for honoring Eric Berry. I'm going to tell you why I think it's important as well, Caleb. But your thoughts on Eric Berry as he goes in the College Football Hall of Fame and will be honored this weekend.
You can't say enough about Eric Berry, the regard I have for him. I think that he was a freshman and acted like, I remember that was the one year I did cover practices some, and he acted like he was a senior leader. And you were covering practices too during that time. And if you didn't know the year, you would have thought he was a senior watching him that year, right? You would have thought this was a 3-time All-American senior who had already established himself. And he was such a veteran and so smart at such a young age. And I remember and you talk about him, you could talk more about him, being kind of the face of the program at a difficult time during the Fulmers last year, and really holding and really consistently maintaining a level head. I think one thing that stood out was he had developed such respect among his peers across the college football world that when Lane Kiffin took over, one of Lane Kiffin's first things was he was very big on, I don't care what you've done. You're not a starter, period. And then he said, except for Eric. He literally basically said Eric Berry's the one player on this team who, we're not even going to question that he's proven himself and he's got a job, and he doesn't have to go back and win his job when everybody else did.
He was, and he also said that he needed to go on to the NFL after that season was over. He had a year of eligibility left. So G. Smith throws in there Travis Henry, Al Wilson, Cordero Patterson, Derek Barnett, Josh Dobbs, Alvin Kamara, Jalen Hurd, Eric Berry, Jawan Jennings. So there's a lot of them in there. Here's the thing that about Eric Berry that was pretty stunning is they didn't really have a go-to quarterback to get your standard quote of how is this team dealing with injury X or how is this team dealing with a win loss over the weekend. And he was that guy, and things weren't going great. And Eric Berry was always there. So I say this, and I mean it, not just a Hall of Fame player, but a Hall of Fame person. I think he was that fantastic. And when you throw in the fact that his brothers played there and his dad had played at Tennessee, I think if you were to pick one VFL in our generation, Caleb, I think Eric Berry is right. He's number one for me easily. And really, there's not a close second. That's just in my time of covering Tennessee.
You have him over Al Wilson as a player or just as a person?
Well, all of the above. I got to know him better because I covered him longer. So it's not a slight to Al Wilson. It's not a slight to Reggie White. It's not a slight to Doug Atkins. It's just how I feel through my personal experience of working with him.
So my favorite was always still, and I understand your point about Eric Berry, but it always stuck out to me that John Henderson chose to come back for his senior year when he had won the Outland Trophy. And by the way, we're talking a defensive tackle. We're not talking a quarterback like Peyton Manning, who also grew up in a wealthy family. We're talking a defensive tackle who, I don't know John Henderson's backstory, but my guess is going to the NFL was going to be the thing that gave his family generational wealth that they had never had before. Not saying they were poor or anything like that, but if you're the first in your family to go to the NFL, you're naturally going to bring in a lot more money than anybody else in the family has typically. And he was a defensive tackle putting up great risk to come back for his senior year for Tennessee in 2001 when he was an Outland Trophy winner. And Dave, I'm sure you remember covering him. My guess is he would have been a top 10 pick in 2000 if he had gone out after 2000, right? John Henderson.
Oh yeah. I don't have any doubt about it. D says on our message board, Cooper Mays has a family legacy of great players. So Cooper's got to be right up there as well. And yes, his dad played for Tennessee, would have been a first-round pick if not for a flukish, weird, odd injury that happened after his pro day. Also, getting some love, Fred White. Now, Fred White, that's a whole different level. Sorry, Eric Berry, but that's a different level. Fred and I are friends. So there's not a lot of people that I've covered over the years that I would call friends. That doesn't typically happen when you're covering a team. So Fred's a little bit different. He's on another level. I didn't mean to forget you there, Fred. And then people say, who can forget the Colquitts? An entire family of kickers all went to UT over multiple generations. So I think we're getting a little off topic here. But when you combine, they were excellent. Don't get me wrong. But Britain had some off-field issues. When you combine the player and the man, I got Eric Berry number one. I can't beat that. As far as guys I covered, again, which is roughly 98-ish, but full-time 110% in 2000. So I didn't get to know the 98, 99 guys as well till afterwards when Fred and I did radio together. So I think Eric Berry as a man is right up. And the fact that he loved Tennessee, Caleb, when Tennessee wasn't at its best, he could have gone to Georgia or Ohio State or anywhere he wanted to go.
I agree. And he was another guy raised in the Tennessee culture, his dad having played for Tennessee. In terms of talent and a person, you're probably right after the 98-99 year. I will say that in terms of just the person, there's still a Josh Dobbs and Juwan Jennings, who I love those guys. I'll also say, so I saw it on the message board and I want to point it out. I feel like the original of these guys was Johnny Majors, because Johnny Majors finished second in the Heisman, was a beloved player. And let's not forget this. Wins a national title at Pitt. And with a national title program at his doorstep, he decides to leave and come back home to Tennessee when the program was in dire straits at that point. And I mean, he threw away everything to try to rebuild Tennessee. Now, I brought this up when you were off last week, Dave. I don't know if you know, the NCAA is finally getting rid of their 25 per year scholarship limits. And it's only just going to be 85 at any time. The reason that's relevant is, how Johnny Majors rebuilt Pitt, right? It was in 1973, that class. There were no scholarship limits at the time, and he had like 100-person class that included Tony Dorsett.
Yeah, one of them was Tony Dorsett. That's how it was pronounced before it turned into Dorsett. And I've interviewed him, and he's not really sure why it changed to Dorsett, but it did. It's it used to be Thiesman instead of Theismann because it rhymed with Heisman. Sometimes your name just changed. Maybe we'll call you Calhoun. I don't. Rick Terry Jewelry Design. Again, they want to be your jeweler looking for affordable game day jewelry. Go to rickterry.com. Also, Sports Treasures, carrying over 5 million sports treasures and so much more. Follow on Facebook for the best sports memorabilia updates. Facebook, sportstreasurestn.com. sportstreasurestn.com. But I got nothing but love for Eric Berry and what he has been able to do. And let me tell you why it's big, guys. Eric Berry wasn't coming around when guys like Butch Jones and Derek Dooley, to some extent, and Jeremy Pruitt were the head coach. These guys want to be around because they not only see that Tennessee's winning, but they see Tennessee's doing it in the right way with the right culture. And these guys are starting to come back. And I think it's important. I think it's important, particularly that Fred White, who we do a lot of work with, is very ingrained now with the current program, because a lot of guys come to him out of Georgia and say, what do you think about school X? And he can say all the great things about school X, but if he doesn't believe in the head coach, Caleb, he's probably going to be honest and tell a 16 or 17-year-old that. Now he believes in the head coach. And I think the same thing could be said for Eric Berry and some other stars that have come back recently.
Well, yeah, that's a huge deal. Something also helps, and something's helping Josh Heupel. And I'm going to point this out that's maybe uncomfortable for some people, but it deals with one Philip Fulmer. Let's be honest. Between Fulmer's firing and the time Fulmer was athletic director, there was a major split at the university with a lot of Fulmer loyalists feeling he was done wrong, who were not going to be loyal to Tennessee because of that. And whatever you think of Dooley, Butch Jones, and Jeremy Pruitt, they all had to deal with that. Or not Jeremy Pruitt, excuse me, Dooley and Butch Jones. The people who didn't like Fulmer felt a type of way when Fulmer was hired as athletic director, so they weren't necessarily fully on board with Jeremy Pruitt. Well, with Fulmer, I think Fulmer killed his own credibility so severely with his athletic director run that I think everybody's unified behind Josh Heupel, because even the biggest former loyalist can't defend him, the idea that he should be affiliated with the university right now.